Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Good Advice Podcast. Welcome. We're going to be talking a little bit about what's going on with these AI data centers. What's the deal? What's happening here? This is such a topic for drama, and it relates to business, especially here in the state of Arkansas, based on what one politician just said. So we'll dive into it here in a sec, but before we do, here's a quick ad from one of the businesses that sponsored today's episode. Check it out. Be back soon. There's one single piece of advice that I give to business owners who are ready to scale their business drastically, and that's knowing exactly what you need to hand off so that you can continue focusing on what you're an expert in. It amazes me when I talk to business owners who are doing their own bookkeeping and tax prep, and worse, that they're going through all of this paperwork at 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, even midnight, slaving away trying to make sense of all of the numbers for their business. Business owners who are making it happen have already figured out that you can't do it all yourself. That's why I recommend Steve Lay with Equity Business Solutions. Not only is he an expert in bookkeeping and tax prep, but what I love about Steve is that he'll sit down with you and help you make sense of the value of your business beyond just reading a spreadsheet. You'll be able to make better decisions, and more importantly, you're going to save yourself the crucial time you would have spent going through QuickBooks or an Excel spreadsheet or whatever it is that keeps us up late at night. So save yourself some time and some money by giving Steve Lay a call at Equity Business Solutions, and he'll show you the value beyond your numbers. Go to equitybusinesssolutionsllc.com to find out more. All right, squad, excited to talk about this topic today. I said it was going to happen, that we were going to address it. We were going to talk about it. It's interesting, I a lot of times when we talk about different issues on the podcast, it's, related to more general topics. What do you do when you have a difficult customer? What do you do when maybe an employee is not performing the way you expect it to? What do you do when you totally blow it with a customer? How do you make it right? How do you fix things? And then every now and then we have an episode that is based on the random shenanigans of what's happening out in the world. And even more rarely, we have several episodes back to back that they're a reflection of the dialogue. They're a reflection of the times. So, there's a lot happening related to business. There's a lot happening that is, frankly, very interesting if you're a business owner. But, every now and then AI has become kind of a cornerstone topic on the podcast. We've talked about it a lot. We've had various episodes about it. I want to talk about it again today. And as always, I want to give a couple of disclaimers. I always do this when it's a little bit of a hot button topic, only because I have found that, when you talk to your neighbor walks over, maybe you bring food over to your neighbor or what have you. I've noticed that when you talk to your neighbor, you and your neighbor could have totally different beliefs, totally different ideologies, but there's something neighborly about it. There's a way to have, conversation and talk and chat and see new perspectives and, what have you. What I've found online is that is not the case, that people have a very difficult time having conversations. And more importantly, people really struggle with this concept of, we could agree on 99% of things, but if we disagree on the 1%, we may as well be enemies. We may as well not agree at all. I also think that today's political structure is very monolithic. I think that people tend to boil down ideologies into very simple buckets. And I think that in real life, that is very rarely the case. I think people are nuanced, people are complicated, people are shocking, not always a reflection of like the general group that they're associated with or what have you. So having said that, again, whenever we have a conversation like this, because of today's social media argument climate, I like to give a little disclaimer that it's not a political podcast. It's not, there's no real angle or drive or, I honestly just talk about what makes sense to me. So Take that for what you will, but I do want to talk about AI today. And again, we do talk about it every now and then. It does come up. I mean, it's got to, right? This is such a prolific time where a technology is just so dominating conversation. It's so dominating marketing. I think it's really funny just how much this is becoming mainstream from the sense of it's popping up in conversations. I just mentioned marketing. I mean, seeing certain services and companies put AI on their product or service just to like generate more buzz and excitement and interest. I saw I posted this. Then someone accused me of the post being AI or the picture being AI, but it wasn't. Someone was selling a phone screen cover that said AI optimized. It's an AI optimized screen cover, which what the heck does that mean? Right. But people have figured out that if you put AI on something, that it immediately has more value. It sells better. It's snazzier, or and I even, I've even lost business to competitors because they have AI as like their main, that's everything that they are. A great example of this would be, I actually, now that I say that, I can't think of a specific example, but I will give you one example. I had someone who came to me and they said, "Hey, we ran a report on our website, and these are all the issues that we see. These are all the things that this other company is going to do for us, yada, yada, yada." Well, we investigated and looked at it, and none of the things in the report were actually true. None of it was true. In fact, all of it, the opposite, was verifiable in the data that they had available to them. And what it turned out to be was this was a quote AI company that had made some big promises, and their ChatGPT or what have you basically made up numbers, made up values, made up answers, and it just wasn't the case. This kind of stuff's happening all the time. I mean, people are just chasing arms open wide, trying to get after the AI trend and the AI boom. And in hindsight, I think people will make a lot of money on it. I think people already have made buku's amount of money, crazy money, and it's not going anywhere. It's not going anywhere. There's not, now that the bottle has been opened, or I guess the lamp has been opened, the genie lamp. What is it? It can't put the genie back in the bottle. I don't know. It's not going away. Seriously, there's not going to be a world where we don't have something like this. Now, will it be something that waxes and wanes with the time? I mean, who knows? Will it be something that continues to drive insane demand, like we're seeing with like hardware, RAM, CPU prices, all those different things? Who's to say? I mean, seriously, I have no idea. I will address, though, this topic of conversation that I think is really interesting. And it's this conversation around AI data centers. And you may have wondered, what do business owners think of this? What does the average person think of this? I'm not going to be so bold as to say everyone feels this way. It actually kind of gets under my skin when someone gives me like an insane take, and then they're like, and everyone's thinking it. They add that at the end, and you're like, who are you talking to? Like, I've never thought that. Like, what are you referring to? What do you mean? So these are just my opinions. I mean, the Good Advice podcast is all about what I think just genuinely makes sense. I think it's common sense. I think it's no-brainer kind of stuff. I have found that we tend to overcomplicate things and create nuance where there is no nuance. I've even had hard conversations with customers, with consulting customers over the years, where their sales numbers are really struggling, or they're not really generating the revenue they want. And they have 18 different reasons as to why they're not generating revenue. And even like quoting random statutes that have been passed into law. And it's like the most niche and out there and random. And, it's not stuff like, okay, you run a restaurant and it's COVID and all the restaurants are shut down, where there's like a clear line from A to B. It's like some of the most random, strange sounds a little bit harsher than I mean it, but just stuff that's out there. And it's like, hey, at the end of the day, people don't see value in your service. People don't see value in what you're selling. That's what it is at the end of the day. And all these other nuances may be true, they may be accurate, but regardless, it's just, it is what it is, right? And I have found that people tend to have a tendency to overcomplicate things and invent details that aren't true or accurate. That's really not something I'm aiming to do today. I realize this is a hot button topic, but I want to talk about it in a way that really makes sense to me. So, why are we talking about this today? This has been something that I think is really relevant. Little Rock, which is where I'm from originally, just passed, they just approved a large data center in Little Rock. I had seen a lot of old friends from high school putting up content against it. I will say it's kind of interesting just from like a biasing point of view. I don't see a lot of people who are like out there protesting against the protesters, people who are like out there saying, we want data centers, like we want big data centers. I think the same thing about like flock cameras. I don't really see people being like, we want more flock cameras. I just don't. I mean, maybe your experience is different. I just think it's a bit interesting when I don't tend to see, for these things that are hot button topics, I don't tend to see people who are like so just fervently we're pro data center, we're pro flock camera. And I think part of that speaks to the nuance of it. I think someone might say, hey, yeah, I'm very pro AI, but I don't know if I'm like pro data center. And I think that complexity is okay. But point being, this has been a large part of the conversation in Little Rock lately because they want to put up a really big data center. And it looks like that's going to happen. Well, one of the people who made the deciding votes for it said the reason I voted for it is because if we don't vote for it, then Little Rock will be perceived as not welcoming business, as like not a pro-business city. I have a lot of thoughts on that, just in terms of like unrelated to AI data centers, by the way. I don't really know how pro-business Little Rock is regardless. Just as a random aside, people who listen to the podcast who are local, who maybe have been to Little Rock or live in Little Rock, maybe they have similar or opposing viewpoints to that. I don't know. But I thought this was interesting. I thought, okay, so being pro data center means pro business. And that's the claim being made. And it makes me think a lot about the way we do business. The way I had a business owner one time who had around $20,000 of extra money that he just didn't really know what to do with. And I think he had like 3 team members. And he was like, hey, I want to like just divide this up and give it to them. And I said, okay. And he said, am I allowed to do that? And I was like, yeah, you're like legally, are you allowed? Are you asking that? And he's like, well, I mean, like, I'm not supposed to do that, right? Like, I'm supposed to like reinvest in the business somehow. And I was like, dude, you can absolutely give your 3 team members a $20,000 bonus. Like, that is okay. You can do that. And I've just found that people have these perceptions of like how business is supposed to be done. And I just find this statement very odd that not being pro AI data center means you're not pro business. I have found, generally speaking, that there's a pretty big delineation between the small business owner and the corporation. I have found that these two entities are often in opposition of one another. I have found that these two groups often battle for lifelong customers. And I'll be totally candid and transparent. In a perfect world, I would likely want to see, in terms of like balance of presence, I would like to see the small business owner flourish and I'm rather disinterested in the proliferation of corporations. This is like why I said it's not really a political podcast, because what I'm about to say is probably going to frustrate some people, and I don't mean for it to. I was having breakfast with someone the other day about this, and we were talking about a topic like this. And, part of what happens with like AI data centers and corporations and what have you is you often see decisions made that are, some people would call them evil. Some people would call them just like morally strange. And on a lighter note, some people would say, man, I really disagree with that. And in having breakfast with this individual, we were talking about how a corporation had basically made some decisions to gain the rights to something, and that this corporation was basically bleeding that property dry, that they were like basically wringing it out like a sponge, which many corporations do. Many corporations look at a certain product or service and they say, how can we monetize this further? What are some ways we can make more money on it? Disney Plus, by the way, just announced that they're adding channels to their streaming service. And so what started as like a brilliant difference from cable TV when we had Netflix, the OG Netflix, where we didn't have to put up with all the crap. Now, ironically, we're coming back around to it. And again, it's because these companies are constantly looking for ways to increase revenue. And often it is in friction with the best interest of the customer. Okay. So in having breakfast with a friend of mine, we were talking about this IP, and he said, he basically said something to the effect of like, dude, this is just toxic capitalism. And he said, and I'm not a socialist, which I think it's just funny someone would say that. I think it's a sign of our political rhetoric that someone would feel the need to say, I'm not a socialist. I think it's interesting. And I interrupted and said, hey, we can like critique economic systems and not have to worry about the implications of said critique. Like, there's elements of capitalism that are really cool and really neat. And then there are some really, I wouldn't just say like non-ideal, I would say outright evil parts of it. And that's really less of a reflection of an economic system and more of a reflection of people, of just people. People are greedy. People are looking for money, new ways to make money. They're looking for ways to expand their influence and power and authority. And it's rarely altruistic, and it's rarely in the best interest of people as a group. But people are often always seeking and looking for and trying to get that next ladder rung up on someone else. It's the sin of mankind. It's just people are selfish. People are greedy. It's just, it's capitalism today. It'll be some other system, down the road. Who knows? But I think it's funny that it's like, well, we can't, I'm not a socialist. It's like, well, I mean, what we're talking about is how like this corporation has done some pretty awful things. So I mentioned that because I think that there is like this conversation on AI where it's like, hey, there's some like generally neat things that are happening with AI. There are some really cool things that happen with AI. I mean, we spend hundreds of dollars per month with my marketing company on AI related services. I will say candidly that if AI went away tomorrow, we would 100% be able to still function. We would 100% be able to still deliver on our promises. We would 100% be able to maintain our quality of service. But our processes would be more difficult. They would be. AI has been great for processes. It has been great for supporting some of the work that we do, but it's not the core of what we do. But again, having said that, if it went away tomorrow, things would be more difficult for us. So we've found value in that way. On the other hand, there are times that I'm amazed at the stupidity of AI. I'm amazed at the honesty of people who want to share how much AI is the core of their business. I mean, it just amazes me. It really does. But in spite of all of that, let's get to the point. When we talk about AI data centers, I think that these things get conflated, that when we're talking about AI data centers, that we're talking about being anti-business or pro-business, or when these things really aren't the same thing. There is, I think, a genuine concern around the toxic capitalistic pursuit of profits and wealth, and how these things genuinely harm society. And I'd ask you to do a little research. Look up why we have things like the Clean Water Act. Look up Woburn, Massachusetts. Look up an old movie by John Travolta called A Civil Action. I don't know how I thought this was a pretty cool movie, but then my wife and I watched it, and I think she was like, this was boring. These are true stories, though, where corporations, I mean, like, this is just in the media. I mean, OxyContin, hello? Like, have you, what's the movie? Is it Dope? Dopesick? With Michael Keaton? But like, what these corporations have done that is not just bad business, it's deeply immoral. It's deeply wrong. And I think that when someone looks at you and tells you to blindly trust that these corporations are going to do right by people, I genuinely think you're a fool. If you are, hey, we're on the just trust us, bro train. I mean, it just blows my mind. I see news stories of tech billionaires who are being interviewed, and they say in the next 10 years, we won't have to go to work anymore. AI will handle it. AI will do it. And I just think, unfortunately, as long as people are greedy, there will always be people who look for cheap labor. There will always be people. I mean, heck, I was this is so random. I was in a bathroom of all places, and I was in like a public bathroom, and they had a picture. I was washing my hands, and I glanced on the wall. There was a picture on a wall of a newspaper clipping from like the 70s or 80s. Forgive me, I don't know what year it was, but it was on like, and this is not what it's called, but this is basically what it was. But it was called like the True Bacon Act of Arkansas. And it was like some law saying that if you're going to sell bacon, it has to be actually bacon, because people had cleverly figured out that they could sell what. Now, the irony here is like the number of ingredients in a shelf product that is artificial or a substitute or presented as, it's like you buy a can of tomatoes and it says gluten-free on it. Just the ways that we like obfuscate or mislead or trick, or it's just interesting. It's interesting to me. But point being, there is extreme precedent for how corporations have misused, and not just misused resources, but with gross negligence have allowed others to be harmed. So I say all that to say, I'm really curious what's going on with AI data centers. I'm curious about the amount of land being used. I'm concerned about the amount of green spaces that you don't get back, by the way. I think my son the other day was talking about, there was a plot of land that had been cleared because they were building something. And he said something to the effect of, where are they going to put the new trees? Which I thought was such a, I swear, we don't indoctrinate our children. It's not, we don't have like a tree hugging curriculum. I thought that was a really innocent, naive, but sweet thing for a child to say. And fam, this is not reality, right? Corporation, they cut down a bunch of trees. They're not thinking about where we put in the next ones. And so this conversation around like ethics and ethical business, I think this is something that is a bit more integral and core to the small business owner that isn't always present to corporations. I read a news story about a community that had one of these AI data centers, and everybody's electrical bill went up significantly because of the AI data center, because they were all using the same power system, even though the AI data center was using, 90+% of it. Everyone's fees went up. Does that seem right? And I I don't know. I read these stories, I see these stories, I think that's interesting. And at the end of the day, I think it would be a shame for us to blindly accept corporate inspiration and corporate ambition instead of recognizing that the real value is found in the small business owner. It's found in the small business owner who often, because they're part of the community, they're thinking about these things. They're sourcing their new warehouse or their building or where have you, because they know the history of the place. They know, they have a better sense than some corporation does. And, by now, we can just call a spade a spade. I'm not for all these AI data centers. I don't think AI needs to go away tomorrow, in that I'm willing to see the usefulness of it and see how it can be a benefit. But I will say candidly, I think 90% of it is crap, and 90% of it's pretty immoral and unethical. And I think both of those terms apply. So I don't know. I had a podcast interview with someone the other day, and I even asked them, they're big fans of AI, and I had a conversation about it. And, I'm not shy at having the conversation. I'm not shy at talking about it, but I'm curious, what do you think about it? What do you think about AI? What do you think about what's happening with these AI data centers? And again, one of the reasons I bring this up is because I just don't hear people fervently defending the other side of it. And again, going back to like these flock cameras, these things are popping up everywhere, which I think is so interesting. I'm like, man, who's this business owner that was able to get contracts all over the country? You think about how the local business owner has enough business in one area to not know every connection. And you could spend 2 decades here and continue to make new relationships. And apparently this person so well connected to put these cameras up in districts across the country. So I'm pretty curious about that kind of stuff. But again, because I don't hear about people who are super pro for these things. If you have a strong opinion on it, I want to hear about it. You can email me, blake@goodadvicemarketing.com, and tell me what you think about it. So just because I'm curious. But anyway, I think that's going to do it today. As always, I appreciate you tuning into the podcast. Thanks for supporting the podcast. The podcast has grown tremendously in the past year alone. It just blows me away, the people who find value in the show. So if you've been a longtime listener, thank you so much. And if you're a new listener, welcome. I hope you enjoyed the episode, you found value in it. We do have a Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice, where you can support the podcast for $5 a month. I used to say as little as the price of a cup of coffee, but shockingly, coffee is now more expensive than supporting the podcast. So anyhow, hey, that'll do it. That's today's Good Advice. We'll see you later.